Hello and welcome back to Football Daily. It's Sunday Vibes time, and today I'm joined on the show by Chris Hamill. Hello, Chris.
Hello, mate. This is lovely, you introducing the show. It might be a first.
Yeah, it probably is, actually.
What a historic moment, seminal moment on FD.
You wanted the day off, I take it.
Yeah, well, I've been deep in an edit, so you did very generously offer to do the research and to guide me through the show.
Was scheduled to, against my will. Zach Jelleb, you're also joining us today. How are you, Zach?
My back is absolutely fucked. My Achilles is nearly torn, but the Glizzy Gladiators won the five-a-side league, so anything for the Glizzies. Not too bad, mate. Yourself?
Oh, I just thought like Sam Abasaki had turned up. So he was going to start talking about his meniscus. Zach, you're a young man. It's too early for your back to be ruined.
I'm 25 this year.
Exactly.
I've been here since I was 18. I'm getting on.
Zach, I'm
That makes me
33
feel
this
old
year.
as hell.
Yeah.
Zach being 25, by the way.
Yeah. Our baby boy's all grown up. But anyway, enough chit chat, because as we know, everybody hates it when we show a degree of personality on this channel. So today we are going to get right into it. We're going to be rating the biggest transfer rumours that your club has this summer. So these are not completed moves. These are the hottest names on the transfer market linked to your team. So we're going to do the Premier League top 8, and if we've got time we might throw in Newcastle as well, because they are making moves. So let's start at the top of the table, shall we, with Manchester City. Now obviously they've nailed their early business. Erling Haaland's through the door, Calvin Phillips is through the door, a couple of Vikings into the side, but that doesn't mean that all their work is done. Raheem Sterling out, Gabriel Jesus out, and now apparently Nathan Ake potentially heading back to his boyhood club Chelsea, and that means they may be in the market for a defender. Who wants to lead with this? Who wants to take this? Because there are some really interesting rumours around Manchester City, and I've got to say, I'm quite excited about a couple of these names.
If you'll allow me to deviate for just 1 second,
Yeah.
on the subject of Vikings, I have just finished Vikings on Amazon Season 6, and it was horrific. So, a real waste of my time. Unlike this show, which will be extremely informative and very much worth your time. Should we start with Gvardiol? Because we've mentioned him a few times on the show in recent weeks. Tomlinson insisting that it cost £80 million to get him out of Leipzig. I disagree to an extent, because Leipzig are normally... I mean, they're quite bullish about letting players come and go, aren't they? But they're normally pretty reasonable. They're normally pretty realistic come the end with a transfer fee. Now, there has been unconfirmed rumours that he has a £43 million release clause in his contract, but I think the air is thick with bull on that one. Otherwise, every top club would be all over him, wouldn't they? Despite the fact he's only had one full season in the Bully. That one full season was pretty amazing. If you look at his stats, he pretty much completed the Bundesliga in his debut campaign, to be perfectly frank. Huge defensive output, over 5 tackles and interceptions a game. Also extremely cultured on the ball. No centre-back in Europe's top 5 leagues completed more dribbles than him last season. And only 4 players in the Bundesliga passed into the final third more often. And they were all from Bayern Munich, you won't be surprised to hear. So this is a guy that doesn't give up on either end. And normally when that happens in someone so young, we spend the next 2 to 3 years speaking about him, and then Manchester United or Chelsea eventually ruin him. So I won't be totally averse to him going to Manchester City, actually. He could be their centre-half for the next 10 years. A pretty frightening prospect. I suppose Cucurella is the slightly more newer rumour. I mean, even that's been ongoing for a couple of weeks, hasn't it? But it feels like things might finally move in the next week or so. They're still waiting for an official bid, aren't they? But it seems like Manchester City are a bit more amenable now to paying between 40 and 50 for him, which Brighton have said that they want. I mean, he's 23, so he's a good age, despite the fact I still think that is pretty sizable. Super hard working, almost 5 tackles and interceptions a game. Has an unbelievable engine on him. Only missed 3 games last season, in fact. And ticks a load of boxes that Pep Guardiola, that are prerequisites for a Pep Guardiola fullback. Great at pressurising the ball. Really good tackle success rate, 63%. In fact, that was the top 7% for fullbacks last season. Excellent technically, very progressive and forward-thinking with his passing. But my issue here is, do you spend £50 million on him, let Zinchenko go for 15-20, And is overall, is that an upgrade to the whole complexion of your back line? Because I actually think here, if it involves letting Zinchenko go, which in my head that is very feasible, I don't think it'd be a massive upgrade. But maybe that says more about my love for Zinchenko rather than any dig at Cucurella for 50.
Well, I mean, I will say that the squad is... They're keeping the squad a pretty similar size, right? Like, it looks like there are going to be at least 3 guys out the door. Actually, and Fernandinho is already gone, right? So even if they were to bring in another player in addition to the 2 they've... Well, I suppose Julian Alvarez, and they've got a keeper in as well. Like, they're keeping the squad about the same size. So maybe there will be more space for Zinchenko because, of course, Haaland being much more positionally kind of... stable than the rest of their attackers might mean that there are some midfield minutes for Zinchenko next year. Who knows? There might be changes of formation. But it's interesting, Zach, because Cucurella was really shining this season as a wing back. And today we've got to rate all these transfers. We're going to give them a letter grade between A and F. So of these 2, do you have a preference? And if so, what are you thinking rating wise?
I think in terms of the Gvardiol move, if Ake does leave, then they are going to be needing that other guy. Like, one of the benefits to Ake, it's his ability to kind of play wherever you need him in that back line, and also on kind of left back position, which Gvardiol can do as well. So considering it looks likely that Ake is going to leave, if they can then go and get someone like Gvardiol for, I mean, I don't quite believe the 43 million price. Again, I was hearing rumours of 80.
Not a chance.
And so if they can do that, like, I think it'd be money well spent, especially when you then consider, well, they're going to be getting, looks like they're going to be getting 40 plus million for Ake. So then really you're only playing 40 or so for Gvardiol on top of that. I think that's a solid move. It'd be a fantastic move. Like, I don't want to kick it off with such a high one already, but I'd be thinking like B plus A, like very, very young, another left-footed centre-back who's also very capable with his right foot. I mean, he literally, by his stats, he's like built for the Pep Guardiola system. I think it'd be fantastic. And as for Cucurella, like, you are right. That's where maybe the ratings do have to kind of be in more consideration. Like, he's not a left back. Like, I'm sure he'd be absolutely fine fullback, but he has gone into like supernova stuff by playing as a wing back and be able to just kind of dominate that left flank. I mean, he used to kind of play winger at times for Getafe and Eibar as well when he was on loan there from Barcelona. So you can understand why he's maybe a better wing back than he is a full back. But I still think like it'd be okay. 50 million is a lot of money for someone who's only had one, very good season, but one season in the Premier League. He is also very young, still only 23 years old. So I don't know. I'd say like if they got him in, B, like a solid B, I think you'd be very happy. Like if they had a summer where they brought in Erling Haaland, Alvarez, Calvin Phillips, as you mentioned, the goalkeeper, in Gvardiol and Cucurella, like I don't think any City fan's going to be that disappointed at all.
Yeah, I mean, I really like both these players. Gvardiol, I think, is the better player, but Cucurella is probably more a position of need. Like, I kind of hate it when there's a centre-back and people are like, well, he can play left-back, because you think, but you don't want him playing left-back, right? And is Gvardiol going to go straight into their defence? He'd be a great signing, but is he going to make them better next season? Maybe, but quite probably not. I don't know, it's a really tough one. Like, they definitely need left-back depth, but would Cucurella and then, say, Cancelo on the right be better than, say, Walker on the right and Cancelo on the left? Yeah. That's such a high level that it's really, really hard to kind of ballpark. But I think both of these are at least Bs, potentially better. But I'd probably go B just because I'm not sure. I'm not sure Cucurella is exactly the right guy, and I'm not sure Gvardiol will go straight into the team. But I think they'd both be good signings for City.
Well, you and I have often spoke about Pep Guardiola's system being quite forgiving on centre halves and maybe making them look a touch better, at least at first, than they perhaps are. Obviously, we've seen Laporte, Diaz, John Stones all held in extremely high regard and perform very, very well. But I still think Manchester City could win the league if something dreadful happened to Laporte or Diaz and Nathan Ake all of a sudden had to pick up 2,000 minutes. I still think they could win the league in that scenario. Yeah. In which case, maybe we do have to bring the Gvardiol rating down somewhat, or temper it somewhat, because, like you said, maybe not terribly important that they sign him. However, they would deny someone like Chelsea the perfect Rudiger replacement. They would deny maybe another top side acquiring him in 18 months, 12 months. So I suppose nicking him from another top 4 candidate, maybe that should come into our consideration as well. I think I would give it an A-.
I think that's fair.
And a B- to Cucurella. That's just my 2 penneth, guys.
I'm fine with both of those ratings, Zach. Shall we move on to Liverpool? Because they've been a little bit quiet after Darwin Núñez. Obviously, big business early doors. And we've kind of seen this from Liverpool in the past. They'll go out, make a big splash, and then kind of say, we're done. And we only really see them dip back into the market if an unmissable opportunity comes up. So the only real name that's being linked with them heavily at the moment, except for kind of the normal bullshit in the rumour mill, is Mateus Núñez of Sporting Lisbon. Do you know anything about this guy? Because it feels like Portuguese midfielders are like the new hot accessory. They're everyone's favourite hot garbage this summer.
Yeah, indeed. You can say that again. I mean, I've seen this guy linked to every club under the sun, to be honest. There were a few rumours about Wolves at times. I mean, any Portuguese guy, to be honest, is linked to them. But yeah, no, he has been linked to Liverpool. I think this summer, going into it, this transfer window, we kind of said they're like Liverpool. I mean, the Sadio Mane leaving was something that was always rumoured, and we were kind of saying if he left, then they'd need a replacement there. They've gone and done that, as we mentioned with Darwin. And now, obviously, we've always said that the other position that they could look to try and strengthen for the future was central midfield. I mean, we were always touting Aurelien Tchouameni, but that fee was supposed to be around 50 million. That almost got doubled in the end. So you can understand why Liverpool decided maybe not to do that, and also maybe his preference to go to Real Madrid in the end. Whereas Núñez is also, or Núñez I should say, is also a bit better, is also a much cheaper option to what Aurelien Tchouameni would have been. He's supposedly got a release clause of £50 million, but is apparently available for £34 million, which is a much more kind of Liverpool savvy signing, rather than going and spending the 60 plus on a player, like getting up a pickup for 34 million, who last season had a pretty good year. He's only 23 years old. He got 5 goals and assists in 33 league games last year. He's really press resistant, which is obviously what Liverpool absolutely adore in their midfielders, and 2.8 dribbles per 90 last term. He's not necessarily got the hugest, or the biggest I should say, defensive output, but not necessarily needed to be doing that, I guess, for Liverpool, when they've got players like Fabinho there as well. He only made 2.5 tackles and interceptions last term. Not amazing, but not also terrible. And while he is completing 50 passes a match in Liga NOS, that is fewer than 7 other Sporting players, including 2 midfielders. But there is a thing that I always think with players that kind of join Liverpool and join the Klopp system. Chris kind of mentioned it with Pep and his defence and the centre backs, but like, you do just join Klopp's side and you become a bit more of a monster. Like, you learn how to play his system, and I think for him, is if he is someone that is a workhorse, like that's what the number one thing he always wants in his midfielders. He can kind of fit into that pretty well. I mean, he's not necessarily the most creative player either, with only 0.8 key passes per game. However, like, he's only 23. Like, it's a thing that maybe Klopp can try and find a certain way or style of getting the best out of him. And for 34 million pounds, like that price nowadays is so cheap. Like, that is the price of what we may have considered like a 20 million signing like 5 years ago. So overall, not too bad. I mean, it'd be interesting as maybe a Jordan Henderson replacement, because we kind of said like that's the next position that probably needs someone to come in for him. But he would need to obviously improve his kind of passing numbers and definitely his defensive numbers. But possibly like he can kind of fill it and maybe like that 6 or 8 role for Liverpool. I mean, in terms of rating wise, like, it's not the perfect player to come in, but I mean, and also like Liverpool are probably going to be absolutely fine with having Henderson for another season there. Like, obviously they've had Harvey Elliott come back as well, who was featuring at right centre mid for them last season before his long-term injury. So like, I don't know, I'd feel like this might be like a C. It's an okay one. It's not necessarily the best in the world. It's not one that's like desperately needed. So I'd be going more like a C rating.
Yeah, I think I'd go a C plus on this because like there's upside here, but I disagree a little bit on the price because 34 million can buy you a lot of player now. You know, like you can get quite a good footballer for 34 million, and he might be great, but the numbers are a little bit underwhelming. And obviously take our opinions about the numbers in Liga NOS with a pinch of salt because the data we have available is not as good as it is for the top 5 leagues. So maybe there is something that we're not seeing in the numbers because, you know, like you have to watch or you have to have better data. But I do look at this and I think, yeah, this is a prospect, but there are lots of prospects out there and you're paying kind of top dollar for this prospect. And he isn't as hyped. This is a little bit more than Arsenal have just paid for Fabio Vieira, who is also an unknown quantity, but at least the perception of Fabio Vieira is as an amazing talent. The same goes for Vitinha, who might be on his way to PSG or has gone to PSG. Whereas with this guy, I kind of look at him and I think, I'm not quite seeing it. But like I say, I'm not super knowledgeable about Liga NOS, so I'm going to go C+. What do you reckon, Chris?
Yeah, I'm probably more so in agreement with you. Like just from a Moneyball perspective, none of his numbers look like he's worth a gamble at that sort of price. But then I guess one of the luxuries, if you're FSG, of having Jurgen Klopp is that he can add that value with his supreme coaching, can't he? He's not a Conte, he's not Mourinho, he's not expecting the finished article. And much like Zach said, you know, him and Pep Linders can probably bring him up to speed, make him a £35 million player within the first 6 to 12 months. He's got a great track record of doing so. Yeah, I'm pretty underwhelmed by this, but like you said, it'd be unfair of us to kind of judge this too stringently because this screams this guy has passed a Liverpool eye test that we don't know about.
That's fair enough. And obviously they're like betting big on the Liga NOS. So yeah, okay. Should we move on to Chelsea? Because Chelsea actually are probably the most active big club in the transfer window over the last week or so. Centre-back fest is in full swing at Chelsea, and so it should be because you've got no defenders. It looks like Kalidou Koulibaly is through the door. So we can talk about that a little bit. But it is technically it's not technically completed, I guess. This is an expensive move, Zach. He's a very good player, but you're paying about 40 million, it looks like. Yeah. The wages are astronomical. They really are. And it's a long-term deal. Rather than the reported 5 years, it now looks like it's going to be 4. But that's still going to put the total cost of this deal at about 120 million pounds all in for a guy who's arriving as a 31-year-old. Now, I know that Chelsea fans are literally incapable of questioning any move the club makes in the market. But do you have any reservations whatsoever about the Koulibaly move, given that he is closing in on his twilight years at this point?
Yeah, to be honest, it's got to a point where I'm just going, get any centre-back in. We just need someone to be playing there, to be honest. Otherwise, Thomas Tuchel's going to have to be playing himself. It is a lot of money. It is a lot of money for someone who is obviously going into their 30s. And for the past, 8 years, 10 years now, Chelsea have been doing a thing where any player into their 30s is only getting a year contract. So to be getting 4 years is a big change, and probably one of the first big changes you'll see under the Todd Boehly era, I guess. There's no doubt he's a fantastic centre-back. There's no doubt about it. He's been brilliant now for the past 5 years. For the past 5 years, he's been linked to a million clubs and constantly been supposedly meant to be coming to the Premier League. And one of those clubs has been Chelsea for quite a while. He's a centre-back who's capable with both feet. Like, he's a really good passer, fantastic defensively. In fact, last season was his kind of best for defensive numbers as well. I think he's not necessarily the greatest in the air, but he, as I said, defensive wise, he's making 3.8 defensive actions per 90. And when I've watched him a bit, he's similar to the way Rudiger can be, where he brings that ball out of defence into midfield and can go on a little bit of a run sometimes. But you are right, 31 years old. He is experienced. He is a bit older, and that does make you have to question things. I would say, overall, I think I'm kind of just happy we're getting someone in. I think he can fit the Thomas Tuchel system, and with whatever we play. If we go to a 4 at the back, he's superbly experienced in that, and he can do that. if we go to a 3 at the back, he hasn't necessarily played that often. I think, in fact, he's only played that like twice over the past couple of seasons. But because he is comfortable with both feet, because he is comfortable with the ball at his feet, I think he'd be absolutely fine with that as well. I do worry slightly for the fact that he is a big boy. He's 6'4", and like maybe the kind of the pace of the Premier League and might hurt his agility and the way he turns and things like that. I remember specifically one game a few seasons ago between Arsenal and Napoli. He had a horrid time. I think it might have been in the Europa League. It is quite a few years ago, but he did have a horrid time in the home and away leg. Same as well when they faced Liverpool, actually, if I remember correctly. Overall, it's okay. I think sometimes Chelsea fans, like I see a lot of Chelsea fans say that, well, Thiago Silva is fantastic, and he's 37, but like Thiago Silva isn't the norm. Like, it's not normal for a centre back to be playing at 37 years old and doing what he's doing. So I don't think you can quite apply that to here. But as I said, like I think we just kind of needed a centre back. I'm not too annoyed by like the fee. I do think the wages are, as you said, very, very high, but I've kind of gone from the mentality of it's not my money anymore, so I don't care. But yeah, no, I think for this one, I'd say like a B, like a solid B for me. Wouldn't go like a plus, wouldn't go minus, and just kind of see how he gets on, really.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just look at it and I think if Chelsea's back line is Ake, Silva, Koulibaly next season, I don't find that particularly impressive. Like, that doesn't really...
It's not necessarily improvement on last year when we had...
I think it's a downgrade on last year.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, that's fair enough. Like, I mean, Rudiger's been fantastic for you. It's difficult to replace really high quality players. But I guess my issue with this is it just feels like, surely for this amount of investment, and that's the reason I'm talking about the whole cost of the deal.
Yeah.
Because you've got to factor in that another player might cost more but might have lower wages. Yeah. It just feels like Chelsea could do something else with this amount of money.
Well, you mentioned Nathan Ake there, and I guess also today or over the past couple of days, Presnel Kimpembe from PSG is also being linked to Chelsea. And I think when we are doing the rating system as well, you then have to look at the kind of players that might be missing out and that actually might move on as well. Like if Chelsea do bring in these 3 centre backs, and what that means for the talented 19-year-old Levi Colwill will probably mean that he leaves as well. Like he leaves probably permanently to go and get first team football. We've seen it with Tomori, we've seen it with Mark Gehi successfully for both of them. Like he'll surely be looking at it and going, well, what am I doing? Like I know that I'm good enough to be playing in the Premier League. I know that I'm good enough to deserve my shot. I can't just waste another year on loan or on the bench. And so I think that also has to be taken in with your grading. I think if Chelsea were to go and get one of these centre backs, obviously it looks like, as you mentioned, Koulibaly being done, then it's still absolutely fine for Colwill. If Chelsea went and then got Ake, if we were going to play 3 at the back, I think it's still okay for Colwill because I assume he'd take Malang Sarr's minutes. But if they then went and got Kimpembe, like he's surely gonna leave. So I think for the third kind of centre back signing, that drops down their rating. Nathan Ake, like, I was okay with the move at like 30 million max, because I also think his wages weren't necessarily, as you mentioned, like incredibly high. Like again, we kind of mentioned it earlier, he's a centre back who can play left centre back very well and can also do the left back position if needed. But 40 million plus, and especially it doesn't look like it's going to be plus, just feels like it's too much. Like Chelsea might get lucky that City kind of priced them out of a move, in my opinion. So that would, for me, would have been like a D. And then Kimpembe, I don't know, Chris, what's your opinions on Kimpembe? Like, I think a lot of people think he's very rash, don't they?
I mean, 150 league appearances for PSG, and I still don't know how good a defender he is, because he's obviously been part of an extremely dominant side that tend to average 65% of the ball and have won the league in all but one season he's been there, I think. So yeah, I agree with you. It's hard to look at these deals in isolation. I've been a huge Koulibaly fan over the last 4-5 years. I am quite worried about his fitness and how that stacks up against the Premier League, because I think he's missed 10 games this season for the last 3 seasons on the bounce. So he has lost some of that physicality, which made him such a monstrous proposition. But a really complete player nonetheless. He's not just reliant upon his physicality, although I think he was putting up 3.8 defensive actions per 90 last season, which was the most he's had to put up. Maybe that says more about Spalletti's attack-minded system than diminishing returns at Napoli. But yeah, some of the things that made him such a great player, his passes into the final third, his progressive passes, they are down against recent seasons. I think last season his passes into the final third, fell from 6.3 to 3.8. His progressive carries went down from 6 to just 2. Like, these are some of the things that made him really special. And if he keeps decreasing at this current rate, then all of a sudden the outlay is not necessarily worth it. But like I said, maybe Spalletti was asking him to do something very, very different last campaign. I wouldn't know the sort of intricacies of that. I think this is a fine signing, and I think he will be fine. But yeah, you kind of picture an alternate universe where Tuchel's still playing a 3-4-3, but maybe him and Todd Burley have accepted that they're not going to catch Manchester City and Liverpool the next couple of years at least, so they've agreed a more medium to long term plan, and you're going to play Chilwell, you're going to play Gehi, Tomori, Colwill at right back. You've got obviously Reece James, who can play central midfield, as you've constantly banged on about in previous episodes. But you can also have Livramento on the right hand side, you can have Martson on the left. It feels like Chelsea have foregone what could have been a very promising young back five who probably just needed a campaign together to make that step up to Champions League calibre for kind of short-term success. This summer actually feels very Antonio Conte in its makeup, as in, we've lost ground on the big boys, we need to regain it right now and buy players in their prime. Koulibaly's not really in his prime, is he? But Raheem Sterling is. So yeah, I would give it a B. I'm not that keen on the Kimpembe move. I think that PSG would demand 50 to 60 million. Transfermarkt, which we know is conservative, values him at 36. He's got 2 years left on his deal. I think probably somewhere in between 36 and 50 would be fair, but not inspiring. And Nathan Ake for 40 mil. Imagine if City got, like you said, Gvardiol in for 60 and sold Ake for 40. They've pulled the wool over everyone's eyes.
Yeah, I think you guys have covered it really nicely there. I would say the Ake move is minimum. It's like a D minus. I think the price is so high for a guy who, people say he played a lot last season. He's still got under 1,000 minutes for Man City. People say he could play left back, he could play centre back, but I don't know if he could do either to a particularly high level. Maybe he can, but we basically don't know. He's barely played since he's been at City. Before that, I thought he was not very impressive at Bournemouth. I wouldn't do that. Koulibaly, maybe a B minus, C plus, because he's a good player, but it feels like 3 years too late, this move.
Yeah.
And then Kimpembe, the fact Tuchel knows him, knows what he can get out of him, maybe that makes it a little bit better, but to me that's a bit of a C as well. So,
but also his talent identification in defence, it's patchy, isn't it? Brought in Diallo, brought in Kehrer. They have not been mainstays in that PSG back line, despite arriving for huge transfer fees in the last 2-3 seasons. So yeah, a little bit worried, particularly if Leicester could be the beneficiaries of this, couldn't they? If they get Colwill for 20 and Nathan Ake arrives for 40, then I think a team outside the top 6 might stand to win as a result, but yeah, I kind of agree with those ratings.
Well, you mentioned Antonio Conte just then, so let's move on to Spurs, because Spurs have done a lot of business. They've got Forster, Perisic, Longley, Bissouma, Richarlison in the door. Very little left to do, but right wing back is probably the slot that they're going to look to improve. Now, obviously, Perisic can play on both sides, but he's predominantly been off the left the last couple of seasons. That's where he's been succeeding. Jed Spence is the main name on the market. It looks like that might finally be progressing towards completion. 21 years old, price in the range of somewhere between 15 and 25 million, I've seen. I've been quite down on this one. I guess it doesn't seem to line up with the rest of their moves. The rest of those moves are very much like the classic Conte, we need to win now. Richarlison, 25. Basuma, 25. Longley, a little bit older, but loan. Perisic, obviously 33. Forster's just a backup. But it's quite understandably recruitment that seems geared towards getting the most out of the last couple of years of peak production from their two absolute superstar world-class forwards. Jed Spence for at 21 for this sort of money doesn't quite seem to align with that outlook. I mean, there's definitely a player in here. He's got great physical gifts. He performed quite a specialist role well last season for Nottingham Forest. But in the numbers, there's stuff to like, but it's not overwhelming. And there are lots of talented fullbacks that have come out of the Championship in recent years, but they've all put up numbers, and Spence isn't quite doing that. He had a lot of attacking freedoms. 6 goal involvements in 38 starts is not outstanding either. So, yeah, I think there is a player here. I'd be reluctant to say this isn't going to work, but I don't think this is going to be a Champions League quality wing-back arriving in his first season. And if he isn't that quality for the next 2 or 3 years, is he still going to be there? Is Conte still going to be there, rather, when he starts peaking? Are Son and Kane still going to be performing at the level they are when he starts peaking? I don't know. It just seems like if Conte had gone out this summer and said, I wanted Adama Traore before, I still want Adama Traore, I'm going to get him, I'd almost have more faith in that, because I think I know what that guy is now. If Spence comes in and really struggles, or just doesn't quite look up to it, then they start to look a little bit thin on that right hand side. And I'm not going to say it's going to like really hamper their season. I still think they're going to have a good season, but it would be a bit disappointing for them if they can't go for a deep run in the Champions League. They can't push for third in the Premier League because they've got this weak spot, or because they're playing, Emerson Royale there still or something. I don't know. I mean, to me, this is maybe a C+. Like, if it were a different manager, I'd possibly give this a higher grade. Or if they'd done different business. So it's a little bit unfair on Spence from that point of view. But this is a kind of long-term move at a side that seem to be planning for the short term. I just don't quite understand what's going on here.
Yeah.
No, I think you've covered it off really well. I don't think much more needs to be said about that, because we've got loads of teams to fly through, haven't we? And I actually think Lucas Paqueta to Arsenal, I'd like to hear your opinion on that, because that is something I didn't really believe when I saw it, but it's now picking up steam, and I am unsure, is this possibly a Tielemans alternative, or a Rafinha alternative? I'm quite confused given his profile, where he's coming in, what hole he's filling in this Arsenal squad.
Yeah, I mean, I had exactly the same question, because he started kind of appearing as like, maybe this is a Tielemans alternative. And, for Brazil, he's predominantly played as an 8 in midfield. He did that in his homeland. Lyon now, he's played much more this season in an attacking role, but the previous season more in that midfield role. I mean, from that point of view, it's a good signing, right? You've got a guy who can spot Saka on the right. He can play as a 10. He can play in midfield. That all seems very, very good. Price is extremely high. As always, Jean-Michel Aulas is gunning for the absolute top end price. Apparently, he wants 65 million. Arsenal are not going to do that. Maybe we're looking at 50 if this is going to get done. 24 years old, has had a phenomenal couple of seasons in Lyon. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Like, this is a guy who got 15 goals and assists in Ligue 1 last season, 0.6 expected goals and assists per 90. So you can play him in attack and he's going to give you something. I mean, those numbers are really impressive. And there is enough midfielder stuff here to see how he could play that Xhaka role. Like, Xhaka isn't hugely defensively active, and actually Paqueta is. Huge numbers of pressures per game, down a bit this season, but historically they've been in the kind of 24 pressures per 90 range. I mean, that is pretty phenomenal. And about 3.6 tackles and interceptions per 90. That's at least on the same level as Xhaka over the last few seasons. So he's going to buzz around and work really hard. Huge dribble numbers, very good progressive passing numbers, very good progressive carry numbers. So he can play in that deep role, move through the midfield. I mean, I kept thinking about and I went back and watched highlights from his game against West Ham, where he was up against Declan Rice. And it was really impressive stuff. Stood up physically to Declan Rice, did great work in really congested areas of the pitch. And of course, having somebody who can then burst into the final third and have that attacking kind of impact is definitely something that Arsenal are gunning towards. On the other hand, I think Fabio Vieira has been brought in with a view to him eventually playing on the left side of a midfield three, I'd have thought. That is what he's been talked about as kind of an interior rather than as a 10. So maybe he plays on the right. I don't really know. I would argue that with Paquetá, he's good enough in multiple positions that I can see the rationale for just getting him in and saying we will work. He plays. Where he plays is maybe not that important an issue, if that makes sense. But it is a lot of money. And at least with Tielemans, I was like, yeah, Tielemans joins. And Tielemans, I know where Tielemans plays. I know what we want from him. I know what he gives us. Tielemans is like the perfect known quantity. And is he maybe more limited than Paquetá? Does he have lower upside than Paquetá? Yes, I would say so. But does he have lower downside as well? Yeah, definitely. At the very least, Tielemans is going to give you an excellent midfield passer who can also have a final third impact. I don't know. I quite like this move. I find it hard not to look at these numbers and dream. But I also think it's unfair of me not to say, what is this? What are Arsenal recruiting here?
Yeah.
Do they know what they're doing? Does Arteta have a clear plan here? Because I don't know. It's exactly like Jed Spence. Is there a plan here?
Well, shades of Rafinha, in that I have to separate, is this a good deal from do I like the player?
Yeah,
because
exactly.
he's obviously an outstanding player, as you've said, as you've illustrated. But at £65 million, I think that would be an extremely questionable move, particularly as Tielemans is only going to cost any potential suitor 25, right? Between 25 and 30. So I don't think this is particularly good value when weighed up against Tielemans in that scenario. Yeah. Lucas Paquetá is £65 million. I feel like it's just not going to happen. Another left footer joining your midfield, which already has Saka, Ødegaard, Vieira and Xhaka as left footers. Just feels outrageous.
Yeah, so I think grade wise, Paquetá, like you said, great player. The price is high. Not sure about the fit. Again, I'd probably go B minus, C. No, I think C plus is a bit harsh. Maybe B minus on that. But I mean, if he comes in and fits, then great. Grimaldo, backup player, good signing. It's just like a standard kind of C plus. Very good price, but doesn't improve your 11. That's fine. Should we go on to Manchester United, who actually as well have gone a little bit quiet while they've been thrashing out these Martinez and De Jong deals? And when I say thrashing out, potentially not getting them done. Zacco, obviously the question here is whether they end up going for a forward, because Cristiano Ronaldo seems to be quite keen to force a move, which feels like a little bit risky given that I don't know if there's a home for him this summer. Do you think he's going to go? And if he doesn't go, main name on the market right now, Moussa Dembele. What do we think of that?
Ooh, is he going to go? I think Ronaldo may be at a point here where he may have screwed himself over. Obviously, he wants so much money. He's the highest paid player at Manchester United. He's the highest paid player in the Premier League with the wages that he's on. It's ridiculous. And he's a guy that only a couple of weeks ago was saying that he is looking forward to working under Erik ten Hag. He's excited about the new project. He's looking forward to the next season. Fast forward to now, as you mentioned, and he's saying that he wants to leave. But there also seems to be a bit of a disconnect, because then Erik ten Hag is coming out in his press conference and saying, well, the last time I spoke to Ronaldo, he told me he was buzzing and can't wait, and he's looking forward to pre-season. Well, United are often doing pre-season, and then they may be beating Liverpool 4-0 in those pre-season games, but Ronaldo is not part of the squad, which actually might be a good thing. I mean, we've mentioned for a while about the effect that Ronaldo has, and yes, while he might be a goal scorer, is he actually good for the team? Two things basically need to happen: is a team needs to probably be stupid enough to go and buy Ronaldo, because they can afford his wages, and any team that can afford his wages probably doesn't need Cristiano Ronaldo right now. or Ronaldo needs to take a pay cut, and by a pay cut, a huge one, by halving his wage, to be quite honest. And even then, he's still going to be close to about £300,000, which is incredibly a lot of money for any team out there. And so, God knows. I think it's probably not going to happen. I just don't, unless some sort of last-minute MLS move, which I just don't think he's going to be taking because he wants to be playing in the Champions League. And any Champions League club out there, like, you just limit. There's like really only 3 names that can afford him, and that's Chelsea, and I don't think that's going to happen. Real Madrid, don't think they're going to go and get him. And like Juve, I mean PSG maybe, and I think PSG are probably being maybe you'd like to think with Luis Campos there, they're being a bit smarter with their signings, so they won't go and get him either. So I think he may essentially just be kind of forced to stay there because no club wants him anymore, and that the Ronaldo era is finally over. You mentioned obviously Moussa Dembele. If Ronaldo leaves, like, they obviously do need another striker. Erik ten Hag does seem to kind of enjoy Anthony Martial at the moment in pre-season, and obviously he's played him in the pre-season game against Liverpool. He scored a nice goal, to be honest, a very nice finish. But yeah, obviously Moussa Dembele is an interesting one. It's a very interesting one because obviously after his season in 2021, where he only got really 700 minutes for Lyon and Atletico Madrid, and only scored 1 league goal, things have improved tremendously for him. Last season he appeared 30 times in the league. He got 21 goals and 4 assists in Ligue 1, plus over 0.7 xG, so looking really, really impressive. He's also taking a ton of shots, which is one of the best things obviously you want from your striker, with 3.4 per 90. Now, the thing where I do question is Erik ten Hag obviously has this whole system where he wants all of his players chipping in and everything. They need to be hard workers, and that isn't necessarily what Moussa Dembele is. He's only making 13 pressures per 90, which is in the bottom 17% for strikers. But it's kind of double what Ronaldo's doing, so I guess there is an improvement in there to some degree, that can be said. He's completing over 1 dribble a game, and he also receives close to 9 progressive passes, so he's a decent outlet. Like, again, he's okay. He's okay in my opinion. Like, I don't think it's something that I think Manchester United will probably be looking 100% to go and do. I think if he did end up joining, like, it's a maybe a B-, just because they need another striker anyway. Like, to be honest, even if Ronaldo stays, they probably need another forward or striker to play in that position. He's decently young. I mean, he's only 26 years old. Like, he's still got plenty of time in his career. And this is a guy who, to be honest, like, as we mentioned, 3-4 years ago, we were mentioning as like this is one of the top strikers, one of the top up and coming young strikers in the world. And so I would be interested to see United go and take the risk for him. I just don't know whether they're going to go and do that. Like, whether they are right now able to split their focuses on the deals that aren't Martinez and Frankie de Jong, because they are taking a lot of time, and it's rough because this is a transfer window that United needed to get right, and so far haven't. But in terms of Moussa Dembele, B- for me.
Interesting.
For me.
I think that's a little bit harsh. I'd probably go A-, and that's all down to injury concerns, and also the fact that if they can't shift Ronaldo and Martial, it isn't technically a position of need. But 26, homegrown. If you get the stats that he put up last season for Lyon, that's phenomenal stuff. And if you get buy-in on the pressing, you genuinely might have a monster here. I mean, Chris, you're obviously a big Moussa Dembele partisan. Can you improve on B-? Because I think that's a bit tough from Zacco.
I'd go A. I think he's gone underrated. I think this would be a really smart signing by any top 4 side in any given division, because of those problems he had at Atletico Madrid. I understand if there's some concern from a medical standpoint. He obviously fainted in training, didn't he, and had to receive medical assistance, and his game time was limited from there on in. So that was a bit anomalous, that campaign. But his last 3-4 campaigns in Ligue 1, playing for an unpredictable Lyon side, let's say, and it's been a little bit tumultuous behind the scenes, hasn't it? Don't think you can be a little bit tumultuous, but there we go. 15, 16 and 21 league goals. And he's 26 with a year left on his contract. If you can get this guy for under 20 million, then you get a big fat pat on the back from me. which is obviously what every sporting director covets in Europe.
Yeah. So I think I'm more aligned with Chris there. I think, Zach, you're outvoted a little bit.
You're out of order is what you are, mate.
Mate, come at me. Come at me.
You've got to apply the
score 5
Celtic
goals
tax
and
to
that's
Chris's
it.
opinions.
Yeah, very
exactly.
true. Very true.
All right,
very true.
right. Well, we've been going for a while here, guys. So let's rinse through the last few. West Ham apparently still after a left back, a centre back, potentially a striker. Linked with Lille's Amadou Onana, valued at 34 million. 20-year-old Belgian, already capped for his country. 6'5". Numbers not tremendous, I've got to say, except defensively. Defensively, he's putting up some stats. There's not a huge amount here, but decent upside. Very young. Price is kind of high.
A 30 mil bid was rejected, right? I'm surprised it
Yikes.
started that high despite his potential.
Well, apparently they've had
Don't
two
quote
bids
me on that. It was
rejected.
roughly in that area. Okay, wow.
I think they started at 25, then they've gone 30. There's clearly a player here, but you're banking on his numbers, his passing numbers, really like zooming up, and that's possible. It kind of happened with Declan Rice. I don't know. This to me is a C plus. Like, there's loads of upside, but it is expensive. But they need a midfielder, though they've just brought in Flynn Downs. Any objections to C plus? I mean, 11 starts in Ligue 1 last season, and that's it. That's all you've got to go on. I know that you've got to get players early if you're kind of not at the absolute top table, but I mean, that is early.
Risque.
Yeah, there must be, like with Matthias Nunes and the Liverpool links, there must be, they must be privy to some knowledge that we don't have. They must have been extensive scouting. They must think he weds to the Moyes system really, really well, and that inherently adds value. But if they get towards 40 for a guy that's inexperienced, then I feel they might have been hoodwinked. But
Do you want to take us on to Leicester?
Maybe Ligue 1 fans will disagree and can let us know a little bit more and elaborate in the comments below. But let's go on to Leicester.
Yeah, because Leicester are looking at a Ligue 1 midfielder as well, and I know we've talked a lot about Benjamin Bourigeaud out of Rennes. 8 million. 8 million?
Quality.
If Leicester do this has got to be one of the signings of the summer, right?
£8 million is an absolute snippet for the output that he put up last season, and I would back him to sustain to a degree in the Premier League. I mean, 11 goals, 12 assists last year in Ligue 1, an excellent 0.5 expected goals per 90, an insane 3.4 key passes per 90, wonderful amounts of progressive passes, better than everyone at Leicester to give you some context, and around 4 entries into the final third, which would be 4th at Leicester. So that paints a picture, doesn't it, of a guy who likes to string together midfield and attack. And Jamie Vardy could be eating up all that progressive play in his final years. A good presser too. It's been as high as 29 per 90 in the past. So his fitness obviously is pretty supreme. Just an all-round very good creator. Can cover. Maddison can play on the right-hand side. We've spoke about that flank as a problem flank for Leicester before with Albrighton, very upgradable. Iossi Perez, very upgradable. So I think this would be really solid, mate. Yeah,
agreed. I think this is like an A. This is so good. Even if he lands and he's half as good as he was last season, 23 goal involvements in Ligue 1, then that will probably be worth it for that amount of money. Like, would you pay 8 million euros for 10 Premier League goals and assists? Like, yeah, you probably would. Zach, can you give us a grade and then take us on to Newcastle, because we have to cover this rogue move that Newcastle might be contemplating.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm happy with you guys. Like, I think for any kind of fee under 10 million for a player that's kind of producing these numbers is worth the punt, and also like doesn't necessarily bring the degree of like getting but them having to do really, really well for your money. So yeah, I'm very happy with what you guys have gone for. Newcastle, as you mentioned, I mean, Alexander Isaac is the guy that's been linked with them and would have to break their club record fee of over really £50 million. It's a lot of money and would eat a lot of their budget, considering like this summer supposedly they weren't going to be going and splashing ridiculous amounts of money that other clubs have done when they've been taken over by very, very rich owners. And considering he's only 22 years old, and there were rumours at times about Arsenal going in for him, but obviously Arsenal now got Gabby Jesus. They're very happy with that. There's no one else really looking at his signature. Last season wasn't necessarily his best by any means. He only got 6 goals. He got 2 assists. He did massively underperform expected goals, which was on 12. But the year before that, he was fantastic. He got 17 goals and 2 assists. He was also fantastic in the Euros as well for Sweden, if I remember correctly. And although he's not necessarily the best striker in the world for getting shots, he's just under 3 a game, and he's never broken 1 key pass per 90. He would kind of come into that Newcastle side pretty well. He wouldn't be too bad. He's a decent, he's a technically strong striker. He's mobile, and he's only 22 years old, so he's got time on his side, and he can be developed into kind of what they need him to be. He's got 1.9 completed dribbles a game. That puts him in the top 5% for forwards. And for Newcastle, it's a very it's a bit of a change in strategy. Their first signing under the new regime was Chris Wood. To then go 6 months later and buy Alexander Isak is a very, very different striker mould to him. They've obviously got Callum Wilson, who towards the end of the season, when he came back from injury, proved that he was fantastic for them. He's worked with Eddie Howe numerous times now. He was fantastic in that system. Obviously, the Arsenal game comes to mind where he managed to get on the score sheet, and it felt like he'd be the guy that they were looking to lead the front line. However, Callum Wilson's injury record is patchy at the best of times. So someone like Alexander Isak is a very, very exciting player, and someone who we've spoken about for a few years now as a striker who is just waiting to explode. Someone that has a lot of potential for him, and his numbers have always been very impressive. And so whether he could do that at Newcastle, it would remain to be interesting. The issue, I guess, is obviously the money here. That's where the grading comes and gets a big hit. Like if you were coming to me and saying for 30 million you can get Alexander Isak, I think that's a really good deal. This could be looking towards like low A, high B. Like 50 million and possibly more as well, I think is where you do have to start questioning things. Like there are other positions that Newcastle could look to improve. We spoke a million times about Moussa Diaby on that right side that we've said looks fantastic if they got that done. So I don't know if the fee was above 50, which it definitely would have to be to get him out this summer. I'd be saying like I don't know, C plus, B minus. Again, just because it's a lot of money, and you'd be expecting him to kind of be banging this season, whereas he could need another year of developing at a club like Sociedad before that move is ready for him. I don't know about what you think.
Chris, what do you reckon?
I mean, does this signal the end of their hunt for Ekitike then? Because it doesn't feel like they would get both. And obviously they've had Ekitike lined up for about 6 months, haven't they? So I'd be surprised if this happened. But yeah, I don't think he's a bad player because he had a bad season by any stretch. So I think this is exactly the sort of progressive signing that Newcastle should be looking to make. And I mean, they wanted much more than 50 mil for him last summer, didn't they? So if they can get him between 45 and 50, I think that's reasonable for a guy of his age with his ceiling. I think it'd be more smart business. But yeah, I'm puzzled around the Ekitike thing.
Let's be honest as well. I mean, if he'd had another good season this year, Newcastle wouldn't be able to get him. Like, he needed a down season for him to kind of move into Newcastle's
territory.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I think this is actually pretty good. Like I would give this a B plus A minus because I think it's the quality of player Newcastle would be extremely lucky to get, but the price is high. And my issue is more there are so many weaknesses in the rest of the team. Yeah. Like I mean, if Bruno Guimaraes gets injured next season, then suddenly you look at their midfield and you say, well, this is a pretty mediocre again. You know, like you're in trouble. So I think they could maybe take this money, get someone like Ekitike, rely on Wood and Wilson and him as their forward core for another year, and strengthen another 2 positions, and that's actually going to do more of a job, I think, of moving him up the league than Isak would this season.
Completely.
Yeah, I think it's pretty sensible, isn't it?
Cool. So I think we're at the end, guys, because we've been going for an hour. So I think we're gonna bring it to a close there. Before we say goodbye, is there anything you guys want to point to? Zach, you go first.
Yeah, why not check out We Need to Talk that went live on Friday. Don't know what I'm doing just yet. Shooting it today, but I'm sure it'll be fantastic. I'll be probably talking about transfers, maybe about deals that have been completed already. So if you want to check that out, why not give it a watch? Over to you, Christopher Hamill.
Yeah, we launched a new series yesterday called The Come Up, where we have 2 academy prospects from rival clubs interviewing one another and learning about one another's football, education, upbringing. So check that out. Celtic versus Rangers, episode 1.
Nice. Thank you very much, guys, and thank you to you for watching at home. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. Standard outro. We'll see you all next time. Bye.